we can provide solutions. You and I have a data set of solutions. Getting the right question, especially with residential clients, that's the trick. That's the key.
You're listening to the Architect My Life podcast, a show dedicated to empowering women architects and designers to achieve business growth, financial freedom, and health and wellness. I'm Shlachter, your host and CEO of MGS Global Group. Our company provides Revit, ArchiCAD, and CAD drafting services to busy architects and design firm owners. MGS Global started as a part-time gig when I was a new mom, but it has now grown into a thriving business that provides drafting support to creatives, helping everyone maintain a healthy work-life balance. This podcast is proudly presented by MGS Global Group. Now let's dive into this episode. Hi everyone, our guest this week is Lee Noel Chase of Chase Design Services. Lee is an artisan architect renowned for her heart-centered approach to designing homes. With over 25 years of experience, Lee has created stunning custom high-end residential architecture, integrating homeowners' emotional desires into living spaces. Her accolades include historic preservation awards and handcrafted museum-quality architectural details for historic buildings nationwide. Lee has also excelled in managing skilled artisan teams at elite construction companies. Lee lives outside of Boston with her teenage son, both sharing a love for drawing and making. I'm so thrilled to talk to her today. Welcome to the show, Lee.
Thank you so much for having me, Aya. I'm just thrilled to be here. What a pleasure.
It's been a long time coming, that's for sure. So I have my standard question I ask all my guests. I think it's really like a preview of why they did architecture or design. Do you have a childhood experience or a person that influenced you to pursue architecture or design?
I love this question. It really gets to the origin story for everybody. So I grew up in a family that had sort of two threads. One was just a really purely sort of creative and artistic thread. I had an aunt and uncle who were at Cranbrook. And so, at the age of 5 or 6, I think, my Aunt Nancy bought a loom. She bought a loom from, I think Harrisville Designs in New Hampshire, and I watched her build it, a big treadle loom, and it's very much like a timber frame structure. You put all the parts together. I think at that point you even had to do a little bit of woodworking to make it happen. And I just remember being in awe because at the end of the day, she had this beautiful big structure. I was a little kid, so this loom was, twice my height, that she could then make fabric on. It was like, it blew my mind. It just blew my mind. And there were, people doing black and white photography and, there's the very creative piece. I kind of grew up in a hippie intellectual family. The other thread, however, was a really good balance to that. I had two grandmothers who really were instrumental in raising me. And one was from New Mexico and one was from West Virginia. And one was from, a really bare bones situation. She learned to be a seamstress. She was an excellent seamstress. I don't think she ever did it commercially. She just made clothes for her family. And made clothes for me when I was little. And then my other grandmother was from a very large farm and farming family. So the whole idea that your environment can be made with your own hands was really just in me and in my family from the beginning. So yeah, a lot of makers, a lot of cooks and seamstresses and quilters and.
So that's a perfect segue to my next question. You call yourself an artisan architect. Can you explain what I know what artisan means, but the combination of artisan architect pioneering in a heart-centered approach. So what is that?
So when I got out of college, I had an art history degree. I had actually studiously avoided architecture. I thought I wanted to go into museum education, but there was a recession. Museums were not hiring. They were shrinking and not expanding. And I knew that I did not want to go back and get a master's degree after being in school for 4 years. That was enough. And I immediately enrolled in trade school. I actually had a sponsor for the Millwrights Union, but I spent 3 years being trained at the North Bennett Street School in Boston, which is one of the premier trade schools in the country, in the world, actually. And I went into their historic preservation program. I thought about going into industrial design, and I thought about architecture at that point, but I really, this making and doing was so important to me, and I loved history. And so working in historic preservation seemed like a natural fit. So I really started at the bench. Really, the first 8 years of my career, I was in woodworking shops. I was building cabinetry and millwork for predominantly for museum quality historic homes, but all sorts of buildings. And, it's funny, I had the chance to go back and visit architectural components in Montague, Mass, where I worked. It's now under new ownership, but the new owner really graciously took us around to see everything. And boy, it is just instinctive and instinctual. When you have your hands on the materials for that many years, it really is in you. And it really informs my approach to materials and methods as an architect.
So I think that's really good because a lot of architects that are coming out of school have no experience with actual construction. And so a lot of the young emerging architects are stuck in their desks just drafting, and they don't even know what they're drafting. So that's a great start. I mean, to already, know how to build millwork, which I think is really important.
Yeah, I really came at it from the opposite end. I really started at the bench and started on construction sites, and then moved up through project management in high-end construction, and ended up at Thought Forms Corporation, which is a very well-known builder in this area. And we did, projects that were just the best of the best, and learned so much. But I really came at design and architecture from the point of view of having seen all of the things that can go wrong. And my original intent, in fact, was to prevent things from going wrong. That, you could really do so much through excellent communication, through using drawings for excellent communication. You could really be on the side of the table where you were building teams and preventing problems. And I really love that. And I really let that spirit of collaboration animate all my projects, to even now.
That's a great story. And I love that you're kind of doing the reverse. I think all architects should actually do that first, as early as their freshman year, to start working in a shop. So what prompted you to start Chase Design Services? And why is it called Chase? Is that your last name? Yeah.
That's my last name. Yeah. So I'm Lee Noel. I go by Lee Noel. It's a double name in the Southern tradition. But Chase is my last name, and Chase Design Services was born really when I got sort of too many requests to help people with their projects. I had work, and needed to build a company to meet that need. But I think the reason I was getting requests was that I always knew I could be a good designer. What I didn't have was the training. And then when I got the training, just very naturally, it unfolded very quickly. So Chase Design Services has been around now since, I think, 2012. So that makes us a little over a decade. Very early in that process, I started to put into practice not only the artisan part, the things I had learned in shop work and on job sites, but I also really focused on the emotional realities that lead to, especially in residential design, especially when you're talking about living situations and houses and families. I really started to focus on that more emotional piece to combine it with the analytical piece that you really get trained to do in architecture school.
So how do you connect with your clients emotionally to get the perfect home for them?
That's a great question. I have spent 10 years trying to answer that question. And the answer is it really varies. I have done everything from walk their dogs and help them fold laundry, to host parties with them, to sit with them while they cry, while they grieve. I had one project where the money for the project was coming from an inheritance. They had lost a parent, and they kept on hesitating at every stage. It was just felt like pulling teeth. And I was like, something's wrong here. And finally I said, tell me more about why you're doing this. Go back to the beginning seed of this project. And this couple who had loved her mother very much said, oh, well, that's easy. It's from this inheritance. And I said, well, tell me about this person, that you lost. And it was, I feel emotional just talking about it. We had such a deep conversation. There was so much love. And I said, I know what's wrong with your plans now. They don't honor the memory. I can see that you feel conflicted because you feel like this project isn't connected to its source, which is your relationship with this person you lost. Let's connect it. And we ended up doing a bunch of things. Then we could address the problem. It was a Hindu family. We ended up incorporating a family shrine, which a lot of people do in their home. And so we ended up making that as partly a tribute to the mother. And it was beautiful. It was really great. But we had to get to that really deep truth before we could really proceed.
So how did you know to pioneer this kind of, designing with emotional realities? Like people do have design concepts, but yours are design emotional, right?
When it really works, when we as a client designer team do it really well. Yes. I think that in residential, almost every project has some root or seed or kernel like that. It's just a matter of finding it. I had worked at a number of really great firms in Boston and in New England. I ended up working, for these wonderful people who are educated at Yale, and, like a Yale architect, like working in that type of office is just such an incredible experience. You learn so much, and the experience of designing or being in that kind of a design environment is so rich. But they were male dominated. And I got to a point where I think I just sort of sat down and said, if I cannot practice as a woman using the skills that I really have naturally as a woman, my intuition, my ability to talk to people, my desire to nurture, if I can't use those every day at the office, I am going to be a crappy architect, and I'm going to burn out. So I have to do something to really change things here. And so I decided that I was going to show up in the design space very definitely as a woman. That was the decision I made.
Oh, wow. Okay. What does that mean? Like show up as a woman? Like what kind of qualities do you bring to the table?
I was going to let it have these qualities of whatever I decided. But, if I couldn't be my whole self, if I couldn't be the part of me that is warm and connecting and nurturing and loves communication and is not always analytical, if I couldn't join the analytical and the emotional and use both halves of my brain that way, it just wasn't worth doing. It's just, because I knew I was going to burn out. And I watched women around me. Many women in architecture are very naturally very analytical. The INTJ Myers-Briggs type is the most frequent among female architects, right? They're almost all that Myers-Briggs type, yeah. Right? So this is a very analytical woman, which is great, right? I have that, but I also have an emotional side that's very deep, and maybe those ladies do also. That's great. But I knew that if I couldn't be both parts of me in the workplace, I wasn't going to make it. And I certainly wasn't going to do my best work.
So I have two follow-up questions. I think being an emotionally driven architect in the residential space is very important, especially for like a new couple or a husband and wife who are designing their forever home, because that's their forever home and you got to be in touch with that emotionally. So my question for you is, how do you find the people that align with your values, like find the perfect clients? Because sometimes the husband will say, my wife will make the decision, and then the wife will make the decision, and then the husband is like, oh, no, I didn't like this.
So what I've learned along the way, which is so great, is that my originating thought in a design project is that we're all coming to the table together. The builder the engineer, the designer, the client, sometimes the interior designer, sometimes there's another person who matters in another way, sometimes the wetlands scientist, we're all coming to the table together. So that's the first thing, is like everybody has a perspective on this, and they all matter and they all need to be heard. Clients will generally come to you in the same way that they would go to a doctor if they have self-diagnosed. So it's kind of like they come in and they say, my ankle hurts. And, they say, I know that it's a sprain. And so I would like you to treat it this way. And so a lot of what I do is just trying to get them to dial backwards and say, oh, that's such an interesting solution. That's interesting that you think that's the problem. Tell me the first time you noticed this problem. So if I can get them back to the origin, and if I can get them to say, well, we just feel like this house is too small because there's always clutter. Now, you and I know that they may need organization or they may need more space, but I can't get to the point where I can even diagnose that if I don't get them to talk about the problem just as a problem. So I always say that it's way more important to ask the right question than it is to, we can provide solutions. You and I have a data set of solutions. That's fine. That's just doing our job. Getting the right question, especially with residential clients, that's the trick. That's the key. And if you can do it, you will almost every time uncover an emotional truth. And if your design then responds to that emotion, it will be excellent. It will be. It improves all the work because now you're really authentic.
So you're one of the few architects that talk so much about positive passion and energy about residential design.
Right.
A lot, because most of my guests are like, not guests, but people I talk to, do you like residential? No, I don't want to deal with a husband and wife. I don't want to deal with the spoiled kids whose parents are paying for their homes. I just want to do commercial. This is so refreshing to hear.
Well, part of the reason I love it is because I feel like I crack the code. Everybody hates residential. People are finicky and they change their minds and they're mercurial and they are difficult and they're emotional, but they're we don't know why. And I decided, I took this whole mess and I said, I'm going to embrace that. That's what I would do with a child or an aging parent or a garden that was messed up. Like I would say, okay, let's get our arms around this. Let's love this problem and let's love our way into it.
I love what you said about love the problem and just, bring your feminine touch to every project. I'm one of those people who actually gave up on residential because when I first started, as an employee for this Greenwich, Connecticut high-end residential firm, by the time the project was done, the couple got divorced.
Right.
I mean, it's normal. I'm not making things up. So that really left a bad taste in my mouth. And just working with the attitude of clients being super entitled because they have tons and tons of money. Sometimes they don't listen to our opinion. And that's just my personal experience.
It is many people's experience. And I certainly have seen, as you have, the strain that an intense design process, a design build process can put on couples. And I feel like across the board, the response from the design community has been, will let us take over more and more of the decision making for you. And clients will even say, I just want you to make all the decisions. But it's not true. It isn't true. Nobody wants their life to be out of control that way. What they want, I think, is to have their deepest needs met. And in order to do that, you have to know what those needs are. And in order to do that, you have to get to know them a little bit. And you have to do it in a way that doesn't really feel like something you got taught in design school. It feels way more like going to a family reunion and seeing that cousin you don't really know very well, right? And trying to get to know that person. You're connected, but you really have to find, let's go take a walk. Let's make these, cook something together. Let's whatever. You have to have some experiences together. I have a number of sort of, more concrete methods that I use to connect with clients. I do in the very beginning do a a little bit of not personality testing, and I've never gone so far as to actually ask a client to give me a Myers-Briggs result, but I definitely will mentally sort of take note. Is this a person who says, "Oh, I hear what you say," or is it the person who says, "Oh, I see what you mean"? Are they auditory? Are they visual? Or they're like, "Oh yeah, I can get my hands around that." Are they tactile, right? I'll notice those things early on in conversation, even before I have an estimate. I will know what their learning style is, how they experience space, how they're, what their, NLP, neuro linguistic programming, like it's a little bit of all of those, but certainly their preferred communication style, I will ask and observe. So I'll ask it and then I'll test it. I'll test it in the next. They say, "Oh, I can only look at pictures." Great. I will only bring you pictures. "Oh, well, where's the list?" It's like, "Oh, you'd like both." Okay, I've got the list right here, but I test it. And the other thing is that sometimes I don't think any of us, for residential, which is so intimate, I don't think any of us know ourselves that well. And in its best form, and so that's like a nightmare for a designer, right? Like you get this client who doesn't really know themselves, and a big communication project in front of you, right? Like it's difficult. But the best thing about residential design, or what I'll call like critical design, important design, intimate design, is that if we do it right, it is transformative. At the end of that process, that client is going to know themselves better. Like it's going to enrich their experience. So what you really are looking for is that moment when maybe in a couple, one person looks at the other and says, "Oh my gosh, I never realized that I really love, small spaces, small nooks, those window seats. I love those. And I love them because of, this connection to the college I went to and those early experiences of being able to dive into some kind of reading or research, right? Or whatever. I mean, you get these important moments in someone's life so that everything becomes an echo of who they are.
Yes, I feel like you need to create a course for architects, if they want to succeed in residential design. I'm not even kidding. Like everything you just said, make it a course and sell it on your website. I'm an entrepreneur and I'm trying to help people who are struggling with residential work. But let's talk about business.
Coming from you, that's a great recommendation,
yeah.
And thank you. I really appreciate the encouragement.
Because you can help a lot of people who are struggling. People get stressed out and lose sleep because they have clients texting them at 2 a.m. I have a friend who works with extremely wealthy clients, and they won't stop texting her, and it's kind of like it's not good for your mental health actually. To be dealing with this kind of stress. But listening to you, it's very refreshing, and I think that people need to know some of your strategies. Just my 2 cents.
Listen, no, I so greatly appreciate that. I think that one of the most amazing things I've been able to experience, and I'm experiencing it right now, is the support and encouragement of other women. It's just a really big deal. We have a different perspective. There's a different lens, and it just is huge. And thank you. Yes, so I've done it as a lecture. I've been invited to speak at the Builders, Architects, and Designers group in Boston. I was invited to speak at GWU in their residential development program, which is interestingly, they do it both through architecture and business. I love that. And I think Denver does that also. UCO Denver does an architecture degree where you can pair with a business degree. I think that's so cool. If I were going back to school now, I would consider it. Let's talk about business. So one of the things that I think happens with women designers, and I mean it across the board, industrial designers, fashion designers, graphic designers, architects, is that your business structure, whether it's your pricing structure or maybe it's specifically your pricing and products, it really gets at that root of places where we don't value ourselves or have been taught to devalue ourselves and our opinions. And so it's a very tender moment to talk with a woman running a design firm about her pricing structure. Man, that's like the height of intimacy right there.
Oh, for
It's a
sure.
tender spot. And so again, sort of if we back into it, you have to handle that piece of yourself about self-worth, that you have your self-conversation about self-worth has to come first. And for me, it was kind of easy. Well, I won't say easy, but I knew that I was all along over the past decade, I knew I was working on something that nobody else was doing and that had value because I could see the value it had to my clients and I could feel my own enjoyment and excitement about it. And I just knew I was onto something. And then I will actually tell you this also. I had a man whom I respected in design build tell me that I was destroying the field of architecture with my approach. He was,
So what did you do with that information?
you know what I did? I took it as confirmation that I was doing something so disruptive that it actually threatened him. He was really mad that I was going to take his clients. I said, our clients are not even the same. The client who's going to be interested in what I provide as a service and is going to have the patience to take it to this level, that's not your client. It's just not even the same client. So I was not
Yeah.
worried that I was hurting that person or his business. But I did take away that, wow, when you do something that's really new, you can piss people off. It's incredible. It was a real shock to me.
It's kind of all kind of publicity is good, bad or good. It gives you more eyeballs, right?
Right. And what was sad was that relationship had been a long-standing relationship, and he had watched me through my education, through my career change from bench woodworking to construction management to design, So I miss the relationship, but boy, that insight that sometimes when you make someone angry, it's them and not you, that has stuck with me.
And you know what my dad said sometimes when you grow, you lose people along the way.
Yeah, yeah, yeah,
Because it's happened to me, like when you grow emotionally or your business is at a different level, you also have
yeah,
to find your group that matches your level,
yeah,
right?
yeah.
I had a hard time with it too, but it makes sense.
It makes sense. And I think you have to look at it like it's seasons. Sometimes things flower and blossom, and then sometimes it's harvest time, and then they go back into the ground, and then something new grows in the next season. And some relationships are just like that. They have to get cut down when they've taken their useful cycle. And I am always grateful for the support, from the people whom I've sort of moved beyond or moved away from. But in that significant moment, I am very grateful for the insight. That person's overreaction or reaction taught me something that I will never forget. So that's a big gift.
Yeah. You think it's a mistake, but it's not really a mistake. It's like a blessing.
It really was. Yeah. Yeah. Because then I was free. Then I was really free. I thought, oh, well, now I know what this is. This is an approach. It is a method. I didn't ever called it a method before that, but it's a method. So, and I
Yeah.
hope to teach it to other people. I'm actually sort of on the books to go and talk with a couple of local architects I know, just to sort of share what I've learned and hope to offer it to someone else. You are absolutely right that structuring it and putting it in a course would be a better way to get it out to more people. So
Yeah, because the thing is, a lot of architects, especially the fresh graduates, they don't start working in commercial work. I mean, unless you're really lucky, you can't really get like a huge restaurant job. People start with a bathroom renovation for their family
yeah,
or a kitchen reno, So I think if they start off well with all the lessons you can teach, then architecture won't be that bad. The whole experience with residential work, it will be much better experience.
yeah.
But I'm curious about your just do it approach, and you mentioned that because you have a just do it approach, you 5x your business. So I'm excited, if you can share a story about, we all want to 5x our business. Can you give us the secret?
Yeah, well, I can tell you what happened to me, and I think there's a secret in there. So, the first year of the pandemic, my firm was kind of clipping along. We were doing 4 or 5 projects a year. It was sort of slow but steady, but it was pretty small scale. I would say that I kept, I was using the kind of flexibility and sort of mother's hours part of it to be home for my son while he was in grade school. And and I think I was also, and you'll see why this matters later. I was a little afraid to really earn. I wasn't focused on money. I was focused on the design. We did a bunch of good work, but I wasn't, I think I was a little afraid to like really, really grapple onto what it would mean to really come into my own as a business. And then I got appendicitis.
Oh,
I was literally on my way to a job meeting. It was a Sunday morning. It was 11 a.m. and I was on my way to a job meeting, and I literally turned right and went to the hospital instead of turning left and going to my meeting. I woke up knowing something was wrong, and then it was just so wrong by that point. And by the time I got to the hospital, I just felt like I was going to die. I don't know if you know anyone who's had appendicitis, but your body becomes extremely toxic really quickly, and you do feel like you're going to go. You just do. And because it was in the middle of COVID, no one could come see me. No one, I mean, my son was at his dad's, and it was just, I was completely alone. I called my drafter. I had someone helping me doing drafting, and I called him and I said, here are all my projects. Here are all my passwords. Here's everything I was supposed to do this week. You have to go, you have to deliver for me. And he said, no problem. And I remember thinking, is delegating that easy?
I love it. I'm a big delegator, by the way. It was not easy in the beginning.
You must be a good delegator because you do so much. I mean, your sort of empire is like astounding. Anyway, so there was that moment, and then there was a bunch of morphine and general anesthesia and surgery. It was like, it felt like a big deal. It's really routine surgery. It is the most routine surgery. But again,
But it didn't feel like it. It felt like you were dying because it was so painful.
so yeah, so painful. Something is so wrong. And because it was during COVID, it wasn't like my son could just come and see me. I thought I might die without seeing him. And it was that bad. It was really that bad. And my mom is close by, and her partner, who I've been very close to, and like, my family, I was like, I might lose it here without seeing anyone I love. And, certainly before we knew it was appendicitis, and I was just lying there feeling terrible and, feeling not knowing what was wrong. So when I woke up from surgery and was still completely, on drugs. So let's just be clear. This was a hallucinogenic induced experience. I was not in my right mind when this came to me. But what happened was I said, okay, the gloves are off. I am going to see what I can fucking do. I am going to see what I am capable of. How much am I capable of? The gloves are off. I am going to see what I can earn this year. Let's see how many projects. And I made this commitment to myself. I said, I am not going to pick up the call for a lead unless I am going to get that project and complete it. I just promised myself I was going to get every job I bid for. And I, to this day, have a 100% close rate.
Congratulations.
Thank you.
And has delegating helped a lot?
It has helped a great deal. Absolutely. I am so blessed. Oh my gosh. I feel like I have the best people around me. I've just been really, really lucky. A lot of them are people who've actually sort of landed in my lap in a way, like who have come to me. So I feel like we have a very special team, very diverse, like extremely diverse, which is interesting, which I love. Anyway, yeah, so the long and the short of it is that when I look back at that experience now, what I realize are a couple of things. One, it was all in my head. Every bit of what I was doing or not doing was in my head. It was not the outside things that I was looking at and calling limitations. That wasn't true. The limiting piece was me and the way I was looking at it. So I would
love
say
it.
Anybody out there, if there's something that you're not doing or have made some assumption can't happen, just try the mental exercise of saying to yourself, I'm going to do it. I'm going to do it and really commit to it. Because what happens is when you commit to making that change or enacting that future reality, every obstacle becomes just a stepping stone. It's just a thing. It's just something I have to get over. I just have to do that thing. I'm not good at bookkeeping. Okay, then I have to figure that out. I have to do something. Oh, I'm not getting the leads that I need. Oh, all right. Well, let's address that. It's all just a thing you have to do next. It's nothing really is impossible. You just have to figure out what those steps are and get about it.
Get away from your own way, or like that the limiting belief,
Yes.
Yes, that's it. Get out of your own way. Like
you have to get out of your own way. Or as a friend of mine who was a writer used to say, oh, leave yourself alone, like quit bothering yourself, leave yourself alone, and it's a funny way to say it, but I love it because it's like, quit burdening yourself.
No, that's
with
perfect.
Some belief about what is or isn't going to happen. You decide what's going to happen. You do it.
Yeah. If they can, we can too.
If you watch
right?
3 and 4-year-olds at play, this is exactly what they do. They look at, or even a child learning to walk. They're not walking. They see people around them walking, and then they just up and decide, I'm going to do that. And then everything else is just steps along the way.
I love it. Thank you for sharing. Now I want to build a global empire.
Good.
I'm going to do that.
Good. Yeah. It's just steps.
No,
I'm serious.
I'm
kidding. I think if I look at people who should have a global empire, you're like tops on my list.
So I really, really enjoyed our conversation. I could talk to you for hours over coffee, wine, cocktails, whatever.
I love it.
But who is Lee outside of Chase Design? What do you do for fun? What are your hobbies?
Well, it's funny. Right now, they're all design related. So I think there's a lot of continuity. I love to garden. I've got a little cape that, I'm just really ready to, do the climbing roses and do the grandmother core thing, granny core, here I come. I'm raising a young man. I'm raising a white, young man in America. That's its own adventure. He's incredible, and it's just such a privilege to be a parent. So a lot of what I'm doing is, kind of helping be the landing pad for some of his dreams. He just started a thrift shop, so it's so exciting. Yeah. So I'm, helping unwrap coat hangers and.
That is so. How old is your son now?
He's 17.
Oh, and he already has a thrift. Oh, wow, that's amazing. Yeah, he's entrepreneurial. He's
got a little LLC, and so helping him learn how that all works is really, that's another thing. There's nothing like having to teach someone else something to make you learn it better. So I feel like I just got, some of my business structure stuff redone and done right. And so immediately had to turn around and teach it to him. It's a great, great way to learn something to have to teach it to someone else. What else? I'm trying to think. I have had in the back of my head for a long time now, a set of building methods that can come completely from upcycled material. So really like mining in the recycling bin or building parts. And I actually did the math at some point and figured out that if we used refabricated wood pallets for structure, and if we used old newspaper with borax and, some flame retardant and some bug retardant, that is all natural, some perlite and some borax. If we used paper for insulation, like if we used, plastics, there are a lot of plastic fasteners out now that are actually, melted down plastics that are then, reformed. But if we used what's in our American recycling bins alone, America alone, and turned it into a building envelope system we could house all of the people in the world who are homeless in 5 years.
That's a powerful
I
statistic.
did the math a bunch of different ways. I've floated those numbers in front of other people to test, like, am I seeing this right? But like, I am.
It sounds about right. With all the amount of waste that we have. I mean, in Germany and Switzerland, they actually pay for their garbage. They weigh it,
Yeah.
I think, and then pay for how much
Yeah.
garbage
Yeah.
they throw and they have to
And
pay.
we keep on using raw materials. Like, we'll always have raw materials, and we just won't. We've got so much good material that we let go of. So anyway, that goes through my mind a lot. But, I think I'm looking for that moment when, my son is kind of off and doing, his next phase of life, and my parents are going to be soon sort of in their next phase of life. And I really want to start, writing and putting some of this stuff out there. I'm really excited to. So
keep me posted.
Well, listen, thank you so much for your time. I have so enjoyed listening to your past episodes. So I just encourage anybody who hears this episode and likes it at all, like, go check out Aya's other episodes. They're all fantastic. They're really, really good.
Thank you so much, Lee. My standard closing question. Where do you see Chase Design Services in 3 years?
I would like us to have published and put out there as a course or a book or whatever, just have shared definitively this method for heart-centered design. That's what I would really like to have done.
Thank you so much, Lee. I really enjoyed our conversation.
Thank you so much.
That was Lee Noel Chase of Chase Design Services. Thanks for listening to this episode of Architect My Life, a podcast brought to you by MGS Global Group. I hope you enjoyed this episode. If you'd like to add to the conversation through your own experiences, I encourage you to be a guest in one of our upcoming episodes. Visit architectmylife.com to apply and learn how. I firmly believe that a strong community drives change and fosters success. If you'd like to be part of this community, join the All-Women Architect My Life Facebook group. Please take a moment to review us on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, or wherever you listen to your podcasts. Thanks again for listening. I'm Aya Shlachter. Until next time.